I never thought a simple date would end with me rushing to the emergency room with an injury so embarrassing that the doctor immediately knew what had happened without me saying a single word. And trust me, you're going to want to hear this entire story because what happened next was even more mortifying than you can imagine. Don't leave before the end because I'm also going to share the life lesson that completely changed how I approach intimate situations, and it might just save you from the same humiliating experience I went through. But before I dive into this incredibly personal and embarrassing story, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who needs to hear this cautionary tale. Your support means everything to me, and it helps me continue sharing these real, raw stories that we all need to hear. So let me take you back to about 2 years ago, when I learned one of the most embarrassing lessons of my life the hard way. It all started with social media, like so many modern stories do. I had been following this guy on Instagram for months, maybe even longer. You know how it is with social media. We'd like each other's posts, he'd watch my stories, I'd watch his, but we never actually talked. It was that weird modern dance of digital flirtation where you're interested, but nobody makes the first move. Then one day, everything changed. He started responding to my stories with those little fire emojis and cute comments. Before I knew it, we were having real conversations in the DMs, talking about everything and nothing. The chemistry was instant, even through a screen. He was funny, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me as a person, not just another pretty face on his feed. After about a week of nonstop texting, he finally asked me out. I remember staring at that message for what felt like forever before responding. There was something about him that made me nervous in the best possible way. He suggested dinner at this lovely little restaurant downtown, and I said yes immediately. Our first date was absolutely perfect. He was even more charming in person, a true gentleman who opened doors, pulled out my chair, and kept me laughing throughout the entire evening. The conversation flowed so naturally that I completely lost track of time. We talked about our dreams, our families, our careers, everything you hope to discuss with someone you're genuinely interested in. But here's the thing, nothing happened that first night, and I mean nothing. He walked me to my door, gave me the sweetest kiss on the cheek, and said he'd love to see me again soon. It was refreshing, honestly. In a world where everyone expects things to move so fast, his respectful approach made me even more interested in him. The anticipation was killing me. We texted constantly over the next few days, and I found myself checking my phone every few minutes, hoping for another message from him. When he asked me out for a second date, I practically jumped at the chance. This second date had a completely different energy. The nervous first date jitters were gone, replaced by this electric tension that you could practically cut with a knife. We went to the same restaurant, but everything felt more intimate this time. The way he looked at me across the table, the way his hand lingered when he touched mine, I knew this night was going to end differently than the first. And I was right. After dinner, as we walked to his car, he stopped suddenly and kissed me. Not a polite peck on the cheek this time, but a real kiss that made my knees weak and my heart race. The chemistry that had been building between us for weeks finally exploded in that moment. When he pulled away and asked if I wanted to go somewhere more private, I didn't hesitate. The passion was so intense that rational thinking had completely left the building. He mentioned knowing a nice hotel nearby, and before I knew it, we were checking in. Now I need to pause here and give you some context about me. I've always been someone who's comfortable with intimacy and exploring different aspects of physical relationships. I'm not shy about trying new things, and I believe in living life to the fullest. But I also believe in being safe and communicating with partners about boundaries and expectations. That night, though, I was so caught up in the moment and the incredible chemistry we had that I maybe didn't pay as much attention to certain details as I should have. We were kissing passionately, hands everywhere, completely lost in each other. The attraction was so intense that nothing else seemed to matter in that moment. But here's where things started to go wrong, though I didn't realize it at the time. As things progressed and became more intimate, I found myself in a position I'd been in many times before. This was nothing new for me. It was something I genuinely enjoyed and had always been comfortable with. But something was different this time, and it took me a while to figure out what. At first, I thought maybe I was just nervous because I really liked this guy and wanted everything to be perfect. But as time went on, I started to notice that my jaw was getting incredibly sore. Not just tired sore, but actually painful. My mouth felt like it was being stretched beyond its normal capacity, and I was struggling to maintain the same rhythm and technique that usually came so naturally to me. The strangest part was that my mouth started going numb. It was like when you go to the dentist and they give you Novocaine, except I hadn't had any numbing medication. My lips and the corners of my mouth were tingling in a way that definitely wasn't normal. I tried to push through because I didn't want to ruin the moment or make him feel self-conscious. The passion was still there, and I could tell he was enjoying himself, but I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. My jaw felt like it was locked in an unnatural position, and the numbness was spreading. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 10 or 15 minutes, I finally had to take a break. I was worried about the bottom part of our encounter, thinking that if I was having trouble with the first part, the main event might be even more challenging. But somehow, everything else went smoothly. Maybe because the pressure was distributed differently, or maybe because I was more relaxed by then. Either way, we managed to have a wonderful, intimate experience together, and I put the earlier discomfort out of my mind. Afterward, we lay there talking and laughing, and everything felt perfect again. He was sweet and attentive, and I felt like we had really connected on a deeper level. When it was time to leave, he drove me home like the gentleman he was, and I went to bed that night feeling happy and satisfied with how the evening had gone. But that's when the real story begins. When I got home, I immediately went to the bathroom to wash off my makeup and get ready for bed. I was tired but happy, replaying the events of the evening in my mind. As I applied my makeup remover and started wiping away my lipstick, I felt a sharp, stinging sensation on the left side of my mouth. I looked in the mirror and noticed that the corner of my mouth looked a little red and irritated. At first, I thought maybe I had been too rough with the makeup remover, or perhaps I had bitten my lip during our passionate kissing. It didn't look too bad, just a little pink and slightly tender to the touch. I brushed it off, finished my nighttime routine, and went to bed thinking it would be fine in the morning. When I woke up the next day, the first thing I noticed was that the left side of my mouth felt incredibly tight and painful. Before I even looked in the mirror, I could tell something was seriously wrong. When I finally worked up the courage to check my reflection, I was horrified by what I saw. The entire left corner of my mouth was bright red, swollen, and looked like I had been burned. The skin was so irritated that parts of it were actually peeling, and there were small areas where the skin looked raw and angry. I could barely open my mouth without excruciating pain shooting through the affected area. My first thought was that I had contracted some kind of infection or bacterial disease. Panic set in immediately. I started thinking about all the worst-case scenarios. What if I had caught something serious? What if this was the beginning of some horrible illness that would leave permanent damage? I couldn't eat breakfast because opening my mouth was too painful. I couldn't brush my teeth properly. I couldn't even drink my morning coffee without wincing. The pain was constant and throbbing, and the appearance was getting worse by the hour. By mid-morning, I was convinced I needed immediate medical attention. I called in sick to work and headed straight to the emergency room, my mind racing with possibilities about what could be wrong with me. The entire drive to the hospital, I was rehearsing how I would explain my symptoms to the doctor without dying of embarrassment. The waiting room seemed to take forever, but finally, my name was called. The doctor was a middle-aged man who seemed kind and professional. He asked me to describe my symptoms, and I tried to be as vague as possible while still giving him the information he needed. He examined my mouth carefully, asked about my recent activities, and whether I had been in contact with anyone who might have been sick. I answered his questions as diplomatically as I could, hoping he wouldn't put two and two together. But then came the moment I had been dreading. After his examination, the doctor sat back in his chair and looked at me with what I can only describe as a knowing expression. He cleared his throat and said in the most professional voice possible that there was no infection, no bacteria, and no disease causing my symptoms. Instead, he explained, my mouth was suffering from what could only be described as friction burn. Essentially, my mouth had been rubbed raw from excessive stretching and pressure. The technical term he used made it sound so clinical, but we both knew exactly what he was talking about. The moment he said those words, the blood drained from my face. I felt like I was going to faint from embarrassment. Here I was, sitting in front of a complete stranger who had just figured out exactly what I had been doing the night before, without me having to say a single word. The doctor, bless his heart, could see how mortified I was. He looked down at his clipboard, smiled slightly, and assured me that this was nothing to be ashamed of and that he had seen similar cases before. He explained that this type of injury, while uncommon, does happen when there's a significant size difference and proper precautions aren't taken. He prescribed a special healing ointment designed for sensitive skin and gave me instructions for caring for the injured area. He also, and this was the most embarrassing part, gently suggested that in the future, I might want to take more time to assess the situation before diving in headfirst. I wanted to disappear into the floor. I mumbled my thanks, took the prescription, and practically ran out of that hospital. At the pharmacy, I had to ask for the ointment by name, and even the pharmacist gave me a look that suggested she knew exactly what it was for. For the next week, I had to apply this medicinal ointment to the corner of my mouth multiple times a day. Every time I looked in the mirror, I was reminded of my embarrassing miscalculation. Eating was difficult, talking was uncomfortable, and I had to come up with creative explanations for why I looked like I had been in a fight. The worst part was that the guy and I continued texting throughout my recovery period. He had no idea what had happened, and I certainly wasn't about to tell him. We went out a few more times after that, but I found myself being much more cautious and observant during intimate moments. Ironically, our relationship didn't work out in the end, but it had nothing to do with that embarrassing incident. We just didn't have the long-term compatibility needed for a serious relationship. We remained friendly, and to this day, he has no idea about my trip to the emergency room. But here's the valuable lesson I learned from this mortifying experience. Always, and I mean always, take a moment to assess the situation before jumping in. Whether it's a new relationship, a new job opportunity, or any new experience in life, a little preparation and awareness can save you from a world of embarrassment and potential harm. Now, whenever I'm in similar situations, I make sure to communicate openly with my partner about comfort levels and boundaries. I've learned that taking a moment to evaluate isn't unsexy or unromantic. It's responsible, and ultimately leads to better experiences for everyone involved. This story has become my cautionary tale that I share with close friends who are navigating new relationships. It's embarrassing, yes, but it's also educational. Sometimes our most mortifying moments teach us the most valuable lessons about taking care of ourselves and being mindful in all aspects of our lives. The healing process took about 10 days, and thankfully, there was no permanent damage. The corner of my mouth returned to normal, and I was left with nothing but a very embarrassing memory and a much more cautious approach to intimate encounters. Looking back on it now, I can actually laugh about the situation. It was mortifying at the time, but it's also become one of those stories that reminds me that we're all human, we all make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes lead to unexpectedly educational experiences. The doctor's professional kindness in that moment of extreme embarrassment also taught me something about empathy and non-judgment. He could have made me feel even worse about the situation, but instead, he treated me with dignity and respect, while still making sure I got the medical care I needed. And you know what? I'm actually grateful for the experience now. It taught me to be more mindful, more communicative, and more prepared in all areas of my life. Sometimes the most embarrassing moments are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves and how to navigate the world more wisely. So there you have it. The most embarrassing medical emergency of my life, complete with a doctor who knew exactly what had happened without me saying a word, a week of awkward ointment applications, and a lesson in preparation that I'll never forget. This story was actually shared with me by one of my followers from another social media platform, and I'm so grateful they trusted me with such a personal and embarrassing experience. It takes courage to share stories like this, but they're so important because they help others learn from our mistakes and realize that we all have moments we'd rather forget. If you enjoyed this story and found it helpful or entertaining, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who might benefit from hearing it. Also, drop a comment below and let me know if you've ever had a similarly embarrassing experience that taught you an important life lesson. I read every single comment, and I love hearing from you. Thanks for listening to this incredibly personal and embarrassing story, and remember, we're all human, we all make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes make for the best stories later on.